Hi there. You're listening to English Podcast for Beginners, your friendly guide to learning English step by step. Let's learn, practice, and grow together.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're not going after, super complex grammar or rare vocabulary. We're actually looking at a kind of linguistic shortcut. It's about learning to hear what most learners, they just miss. Our mission today is a deep dive into something we're calling invisible English.
Exactly. It's all those quiet, unassuming little words and phrases you hear constantly in conversations, movies, everywhere, really. But they're so subtle, your brain tends to just filter them out, overlooks them. They can feel like background noise, almost like static, but honestly, they carry so much of the real tone and the natural rhythm of English.
Right, and if you're aiming for that authentic, natural fluency, this is, it's crucial. Real proficiency isn't just about memorizing impressive words you might use once in blue moon. It's often hidden in what you might call linguistic awareness, really noticing those patterns the brain usually just, tunes out.
And there's a fascinating paradox here, isn't there? These common expressions seem basic, but they're actually loaded with nuance. Things like social weight, cultural tone, all essential for sounding, confident and natural like a native speaker. So today, we're pushing past just understanding the words. We want to invite you, the listener, to really sharpen your perception, to unlock that deeper, more intuitive level of speech.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's get into the anatomy of this invisible English. Think about it like building a house. Traditional learning, that teaches you the big parts, the nouns, the verbs, the walls, basically. But real conversational flow, that really hinges on these simple connectors, these micro phrases. They're like the plaster, the glue holding it all together, essential stuff.
And learners often rush past that. They're chasing the big vocabulary, the impressive sentence structures, and they completely ignore these foundational bits. But mastering these unnoticed words, it dramatically boosts your flow, your spontaneity, makes you sound much more authentic because they manage the pace, the emotion of the conversation.
Okay, let's get specific then. Our sources break these little connectors into, I think it was 5 critical categories. And we should probably spend a bit of time here because it's the function that really matters, not just the dictionary definition. Let's start with softeners. Things like kind of and sort of.
Right, softeners. Think of them as social lubrication. They lessen the impact of a statement or maybe introduce an opinion more gently. Like if you just say, that shirt is ugly, it's pretty blunt, maybe aggressive, but that shirt is kind of ugly. See, you've added some vagueness. It signals, hey, this is just my take. I'm not stating a fact.
But is there a risk there? Like if you use kind of too much, could you just sound unsure, vague? Where's that line?
That's a great point. It really comes down to rhythm and context, sprinkled in appropriately, show social savvy. But yeah, if every other word is sort of or like, then it can definitely sound hesitant. But remember, their main job. Often, it's about mitigating potential rudeness. They're a powerful tool for giving feedback or disagreeing without being too harsh. That's huge in English social dynamics.
Okay, that makes sense. Moving on then. Category 2. Conversational bridges. These sound important for just keeping the chat flowing. Phrases like, or I mean.
Yeah, essential. They're like little signals to your conversation partner. So it often acts as a check for shared understanding. Like, I went to that cafe we mentioned, It assumes you both have that shared context.
And I notice that often feels like someone's correcting themselves or maybe just refining what they just said. Even if it wasn't technically wrong, it kind of shifts the focus slightly.
Spot on. If I say the presentation was rough, the slides were confusing, that clarifies why it was rough. It zeroes in on a specific aspect to the previous statement. It helps make the dialogue feel connected, not just a series of random points.
Got it. Okay, next up, reaction words. These feel like the really quick ones where the emotion pops out, like, really? All right.
Yes. And these are absolutely vital. They're like instant feedback. They show you're actively listening, replacing just, nodding silently.
Yeah.
And crucially, this is where native speakers often show surprise, doubt, agreement, all in real time. The tone of really changes everything. Say quickly, it's genuine surprise, dragged out a bit, maybe with a skeptical tone. Total disbelief.
And I suspect these are the ones learners often miss completely. They might wait for a whole paragraph to finish before giving any reaction, which can sound a bit stiff, formal, whereas native speakers pepper them in constantly.
Precisely. You need to capture that immediacy. It's part of the rhythm, the music of the language really shows you're right there with them.
Okay, we also have to cover the politeness markers. Things like, please, thanks, excuse me. They seem obvious, maybe, but the delivery, that's nuanced.
Oh, definitely. Think about the speed and context. Someone bumps you, mutters a quick, "Excuse me," barely looking up. That's just routine social oil. But if they stop, make eye contact, say it slowly, clearly, that carries much more weight, feels more formal, more apologetic maybe. The rhythm of these simple markers conveys social distance, urgency, all sorts of things instantly.
Yeah.
The difference between, say, typical American service chat and British politeness often boils down to the frequency and speed of these markers.
Interesting. Okay, and the last category, one I find really fascinating because you see it changing. Time markers or adverbs that frame a statement, like actually, basically, literally.
Yes, actually is a huge one for native speakers. It often flags a slight contrast or introduces a fact that might be a little surprising. If I ask, "Did you enjoy the party?" and you say, "Actually, I couldn't make it," that actually signals a correction to my assumption.
Right. And then there's literally. Our sources definitely mention how literally is often used, well, not literally anymore, more for hyperbole, for emphasis. If someone says, "I was literally melting," they probably weren't actually turning into liquid, right? They're just emphasizing extreme heat.
Exactly. And that hyperbolic use is a perfect example of why focusing on invisible English is key. If you only learn the strict dictionary definition of literally, you'd misunderstand or misuse it in loads of modern conversations. So when you really start hearing these 5 types, softeners, bridges, reactions, politeness markers, and these framing adverbs, you're hearing the real scaffolding of conversational English.
Okay, so that leads perfectly to the next big question. If these words are the glue, if they're everywhere, why don't we notice them more easily? Why does it take effort?
The answer is basically cognitive economy. Our brains are incredibly efficient machines. Ruthlessly so sometimes. To save energy, to focus on the main message, the nouns, the verbs, the key information, the brain filters out language that's highly frequent and repetitive. It treats these common fillers, these connectors, almost like background hum, white noise.
So if I'm watching a movie or listening to, well, this deep dive, my brain is actively working against my fluency goal by dismissing, or kind of as just fluff,
Yeah.
non-essential.
Pretty much, yeah. Think about listening to music. You naturally focus on the melody, the singer's voice, maybe the lyrics. Your brain might filter out the steady, repetitive drum beat after a while. These microphrases, they're the drum beat of conversation. They provide the rhythm, the structure. But if you're a learner focused only on meaning, your mental filter tends to just ignore them. It's a deep-seated habit, and you have to consciously work to reverse it.
Wow. So the very thing that makes them essential, how common and repetitive they are, is exactly what makes them invisible to our automatic filters. Which means to really boost fluency, we have to actively fight that mental habit. We need to deliberately notice what usually gets missed.
You've got it. You're essentially training your brain to treat the drum beat as just as important as the melody. That's really the core of active perception when it comes to language learning.
Okay, so the solution seems clear then. We need to shift gears, move away from just passive listening where sound washes over us but nothing really sticks, and into active skill building. We need some practical steps, turn ourselves into, linguistic detectives.
Yes, the key is changing your intention. Stop just letting English content play in the background. Instead, give yourself little targeted listening missions whenever you engage with English media.
Right. And our sources laid out some great strategies for this. First, and this seems obvious now, is to specifically listen for those 5 categories we talked about. So don't just follow the plot of the movie, listen for the glue. How do the characters use softeners when they disagree? What reaction words pop up?
Exactly. And then comes a really vital practice element.
Yeah.
Shadowing microphrases. And the key here is micro. Don't try to shadow entire long, complex sentences. That's overwhelming. Instead, pause the audio or video right after you hear a short reaction word or a connector and immediately repeat it. Try to mimic the tone, the speed, the intonation.
So it builds the muscle memory for the sound, the feel of the language's rhythm. So instead of mentally translating "I agree" from your first language, you just instinctively repeat with the right kind of emphasis.
Precisely. And I really like this next tip. Keep a tiny expression notebook. Dedicate a specific notebook or section just for these high-frequency short phrases, not for complex vocabulary you might rarely use.
So an entry wouldn't just be the word actually. It might be actually, I was just about to call you. Function. Mildly surprising correction timing update.
Yeah.
You're building a toolkit of conversational cement, basically.
Exactly, a practical toolkit. And the final step, naturally, is to practice using these connectors intentionally when you speak. When you're forming a sentence, make a conscious effort to start with, basically, or transition with I mean, instead of reaching for a direct translation from your native language, because translating those little connecting bits, that almost always sounds stiff and unnatural in English.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, fluency isn't just about knowing more words or grammar rules. It's about refining how we listen, how we filter input, and then deliberately imitating what we pick up. That feels like a significant shift from how many people approach learning.
It really is. Fundamentally, fluency is so much about rhythm, tone, and awareness of these subtle expressions. When you start consciously using kind of appropriately or dropping in a well-timed, really, it signals a much deeper understanding. You understand the hidden rules of interaction in English. You're not just speaking words, you're participating in the culture of the conversation.
Right. So let's try to bring this transformation home for the listener. We need to encourage them to stop just passively receiving the language. The goal is imitation, but imitation aimed at building intuition fast.
Absolutely. The aim isn't just copying words, it's imitating how native speakers react, how they confirm understanding, how they manage the back and forth. You need to capture and reproduce the whole package, the speed, the emphasis, the little rises and falls in pitch, the way someone says, "Oh, right," with a certain intonation. That can convey way more than a perfectly grammatical sentence.
And the most powerful tool for building that intuition seems to be repetition. Focused repetition. Maybe stop chasing brand new vocabulary for just 1 week. Instead, take a short audio clip, maybe just 2 or 3 minutes, and listen to it over and over and over. Listen until you can perfectly mimic the tone and the placement of those everyday invisible phrases that keep popping up.
Yes. When you really dedicate yourself to consciously absorbing these common, repeating microphrases, you'll find that targeted imitation builds intuition much faster. And that kind of focused repetition, it builds real conversational fluency far more effectively than, say, staring at long lists of academic words you might never use.
This has been incredibly insightful, really looking at something familiar in a totally new way. Let's quickly summarize the core takeaway for you, the listener.
Okay, first takeaway. The most powerful English expressions you can learn are often the ones you hear constantly, but your brain tunes out. They're hiding in plain sight.
Second, real fluency, that natural sound, it starts when you stop just learning more stuff and start intentionally noticing, absorbing, and then using these simple microexpressions yourself. Match the rhythm.
And finally, maybe a thought to reflect on. True mastery in language often lies in the subtleties. So take some pride in starting to notice these tiny details that most learners overlook. Challenge yourself. Stop translating the conversational glue. Start speaking with this active perception we've discussed. Do that and watch how your English transforms simply because you started paying attention to the parts everyone else filters out.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now go out there and listen to the world around you and really hear the invisible parts.